Welcome, everyone. My name is Teri Bybee, and I am the founder of Women Who Risk. And I am so pleased and excited to be talking to Karina Pedroza today in a Women Who Risk interview. She's going to bring so many insights that I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity to chat with her. So just a really quick intro, and then I'm going to let her just share all the extra. So Karina is a licensed financial professional and has dedicated her career to empowering families and communities, particularly Latinos, to break the cycle of poverty through education and financial literacy. So again, welcome, Karina. If you'd like to add anything to that, please do.
Thank you so much, Teri, for having me today. Yes, at the very basic of it, I am a financial professional. I have over 10 years in higher education as well. And that's kind of where my passion started for helping others and kind of seeing what are the challenges and the barriers that are my community, specifically the Latino community, faces. At first, I thought it was education. Lack of access to higher education, to degrees, to higher wages. And so for several years, I helped students achieve that. And then I realized that even if they were receiving their degrees and they were making more money, they still weren't moving out of poverty or moving out of low income households. And so financial literacy, I think, is super important when it comes to that for everybody. And it was just something that I thought was unattainable for my community. I grew up in a single parent household, also low income, and we were just never taught those concepts. So I realized that financial literacy is at the basis of a lot of those issues. Of course, there are other things like access to other resources, but once they have achieved that, that they have a degree and they're able to get a better paying job or get a career and they're making more money, that doesn't necessarily translate to moving out of that poverty cycle. So that's how I got interested in financial literacy, more so for myself. And then I realized that so many other people in the community needed that. And then I worked briefly with small business owners. And again, I realized that entrepreneurship is also the path out of poverty for many. It's just a very different pathway, of course, from higher education and just the traditional pathway. And I realized in my Latino community, a lot of us do have that entrepreneurial spirit. A lot of immigrant communities actually have that spirit. And very many don't have access to the resources. And in Siouxland, we have very many resources for small business owners. And so again, at the very basic of it is that access to resources, access to somebody that speaks their language, that is able to connect them with those resources. And then now I am the director of development for Rosecrans Jackson Centers. We offer treatment for substance use disorders. And it is my role to fundraise essentially and bring in money that will help make our services again accessible to those in need. So again, I just have really seen that my focus is access, and whatever that might be, whether it's higher education or financial literacy, treatment, access and the lack of access is really what's causing a lot of those challenges that we face.
It's so interesting just from the perspective of what we're in a sense talking about is communication, right? Having the communication, you acting as the bridge of knowing the resources, what's out there and those things that they can access if they knew it. And then your, again, education, all those pathways you took, in a sense, self-taught, realizing what you needed and acting as that bridge for others. So yeah, I can see your passion shining through when it comes to your community and what you want to do to support them and others, I'm sure. So
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I have questions.
Yes.
I want to ask you about. When you think about your career, whether you're talking about your current one or your pathway in your career, what has inspired you to take these risks, these what I like to term joyful risks, those chosen risks?
I believe in mentorship, and now that has grown to sponsorship. So at first it was mentorship. It was being the mentor and seeking the mentor that I never had. Growing up as a young female, a young person of color in a predominantly white school community, coming from a first generation household, low income, there were so many things that I didn't have access to. I didn't have access to not just money, but that social capital that I came to realize was super important, of course, to success a lot of times, especially depending on what your career is. And so as I went into college, I was part of a Latina-based sorority, and we're more of a professional organization. But that was the first time that really my identity came to flourish, I guess. At first I had a lot of, I guess, identity crisis. I had an identity crisis when I was in high school. I always did well in school. I was always involved, and that always didn't translate, or it was seen as something that I should have as a person of color. And so a lot of people called me coconut. They called me different names. I just didn't really feel like I fit in. And I felt like I needed to be one or the other, that I either had to be Mexican and in love with my culture, or I had to be smart and I had to do well in school. So when I went to college, I met these amazing, beautiful ladies in college, professional women, that I realized that I was able to have both. Yeah. And so really, I realized taking those risks and being a voice for those that don't have it was important. I was blessed with being born here, with having citizenship, with growing up knowing English and Spanish. And so I was able, like you mentioned, to communicate in two languages and to really help two different communities, and really be that representation that I was lacking. And so that kind of fueled me through college. And then I had my own children, and I have one daughter and two sons, but I think it's mostly my daughter that pushes me forward. And other young women like her, other young professionals now, other people of color, again, representation, and just being that driving force and the voice for many that can't have the voice, especially right now, really is, I guess, my passion and what drives me through all those challenges and taking those risks, for sure.
And I just want to touch real quickly on thinking about the experience you had in high school. First and foremost, kids can be cruel, right?
Yes,
it's so simple because it's much more common to follow whoever the popular person is in whatever their thoughts are. And so anyone from a minority background and or that doesn't quite fit in for whatever reason is the risk that you have to take just to be. And like you said, finding your voice, finding yourself, it's a huge deal. And it just makes me think of the possibilities, I guess, that you've taken up on how you can support these young women, and probably men as well. But if you're anything like me, we tend to, it's like, let me support the women. But yes, it's such a big deal to have those resources, to have that support. And like you said, the mentorship and having the voice at a younger age. And if I myself don't have the minority card that I was dealt, however, being a woman and being a shy person, I too had to find my identity, and it didn't happen till college or after as well. And I think that just you talking about being able to support those younger people is just a huge deal. And then carrying that forward as you have with the professional women as well. So I just wanted to comment on that, because I think it is a key that we're missing some of the keys to that piece, I think. So seeing you step into that role is a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much.
When you think about the risks that you've taken, in your career, what or in your life, honestly, what would you think is maybe one of the most significant risks you've taken?
I would say the risk that I took about a year ago, like I mentioned, I had spent 10 years in higher education, not
Mhm.
at the same place. I worked at two different colleges, but still it was in higher education. And I thought that that was going to be my path for the rest of my career, that I would work at a college. And about a year and a half ago, I left and I miss it, but I have found something that I'm more passionate about now. I miss the students that I was able to help, and I still believe in higher education. However, that was probably the scariest moment for me. It took a lot of contemplation, a lot of inner reflection to
Mhm.
decide to actually leave. It came as a shock to a lot of people that I worked with. It came as a shock to my family and to myself for sure. And so, really, just stepping outside and not knowing, I didn't have another job lined up. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was already a financial professional, so that kind of held me over until I found a different job. But leaving higher education and what I had known for the last 10 years and a job that I thought that I loved was very scary.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it was the best decision for me and for my family. And now, what I've realized in my career, and I've had two career changes since then. And a lot of people ask me, how did you become director of development and how did you find this job? And I realized when I left higher education, I something inside of me clicked, and it made me realize that I was more than a position. I was my skills, and it was everything that I had learned, and that my skills were transferable to other positions, and that I was able to do different things. And so that fear, there's still that imposter syndrome, of course, and that uncertainty, but now it's a lot less than it was a year and a half ago. I know that I'll be okay, thankfully, because of the hard work that I have put in and the preparation and education that I have and the experiences that I have. And so it's a lot less scary now. It's still very scary thinking about if I had to find a different type of job. But at the end of the day, that it, I guess career wise, I felt like I had hit rock bottom almost a year and a half ago because, like I said, I left. It wasn't necessarily impulsively because I had thought about it for a while. But I was unhappy in my job. And again, it also went against that
Oh,
let them win. And now I realize that it actually took courage.
we
You
froze
froze
for
a little
just a
bit.
moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you were saying that the basically the why. Could you repeat
Yeah,
that, please?
for sure. So the why of, I guess why I left, I realized that it actually took a lot of courage to leave. When I
Mhm.
did, you know, within those 2 weeks or your 2 week notice, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions.
Mhm.
And one opinion was I was being a coward. I shouldn't have let them win. I should have just stuck it out. So, really going against the idea that you should be unhappy, that there's always going to be problems in a workplace, there's always going to be drama, everywhere is the same, that thing, and that you should just suck it up because it's a good paycheck. um, so I really had to go against that, and again, that was probably the scariest I felt in a long time.
I think that's it's so important that you've shared that because and I think this is a big thing for women, especially, is that we are basically expected to just
Yes.
deal with it. And, if you're feeling emotions, you're supposed to express them because they're not professional, when in reality, they're part of us and we are professionals, and therefore it is part of being a professional. And the being able to tap into, number one, the courage that you talked about, but the courage to be able to say, this isn't working for me.
Mhm.
This does not make me happy. There's got to be something else out there, something different. And I'm not willing to accept things like this. So that is huge courage. And I also wanted to comment on the value of your lived experience. Going back to where you were saying it's your skills are transferable. Your lived experience, as we gather more and more of that lived experience,
Mhm.
it can be used in so many different ways. And we sometimes get pigeonholed
For
because of
sure.
what type of education we got and or what type of job we've had in the past. So it just so sounds like you've broken through so many of these molds that tried to hold you in place. And the fact that you'd have has allowed you to live, I'm sure, a
Mhm.
much more fulfilling time, even if you're not, there's still more, right? There's still more.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's really exciting to hear. So,
Thank you.
knowing that this was really scary for you, how did you overcome that self doubt, that fear to make the change?
Sure. It definitely took a lot of encouragement from my family and from my friends. They can always say, "You got this, you'll find something," but in that moment, it doesn't feel that way. It definitely helped, like I said, that I had kind of a side job, a side career that kind of held me over. It was the first time that I felt also that sense of freedom
Mm,
where, as an entrepreneur, you can set your own schedule. It's a lot of work, and it's not for me for full time. But it definitely showed me what I was missing as well. My life had been stuck in the same routine in a sense for 10 years, and I did have flexibility, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's still kind of the same. And so realizing that there are different structures to a career as well, even if it's an office job, that there are different structures to an office job, there are different expectations, just again, different experiences, and you can still be you can still have a career, you can be an entrepreneur. So really finding that, I got to spend a lot of time with my children. It um it was right at the beginning of summer, so I was there at the end of their school year, a little bit of the summer. So it really that it made me realize again that my kids are so little for only a certain period of time,
yeah, sorry about that.
and that's okay. That they're little for a little bit of time, and that um, any job, you're replaceable. I guess that's what I realized as well. And I think when I contemplated about leaving, a lot of my thoughts were, well, what about the students, and what about my coworkers, and what about them? How am I going to leave them?
Yeah,
And when I did decide to leave, there were opinions again expressed, or thoughts expressed of, "We're sad to see you go," type of thing. But again, I mean, after 2 weeks, or even less, they moved on, life moved
right.
on, and here I was thinking that they would be devastated essentially because I was leaving, or that it would stop, that the world would stop going round, and it didn't. And so I guess that's what really helped me as well. I mean, it was hard, it hurt, it was very hurtful. But again, at the same time, I was like, okay, I made this decision for me and my family, and this is what I'm doing. And this is, I mean, both can be true. I don't have to be completely selfless. And, I can still make a difference, and I can
Yeah.
still put myself and my family first.
And I think that that is such a valid point from the perspective as we do we do get caught in a sense,
Mhm.
right? Because we think that it does, in a sense, depend on us, when in reality, there's other people that can be slotted. Will they have the exact same skills and be as good as you? Possibly not. However, you can take what you have, that greatness, and take it wherever you
Mhm.
go and make those changes and make the difference that you're talking about. And again, I think as women, we have to be reminded of that. So wonderful that you had your family to support you in making those choices, and not trying to hold you back, saying, that there's only one safe route. Because,
Yeah.
in a sense, what a risk it would have been to stay, to be unhappy, to run up maybe against a glass ceiling because you had done everything you could there, and instead
Mhm.
breaking through, breaking out, and taking the risk for yourself and your family. It's
Yeah.
a wonderful, wonderful thing to be contemplating. Knowing that you've taken several risks with this journey, how do you balance taking these risks, especially from a professional standpoint, and
Mhm.
your personal and family life?
It's a lot of trial and error,
Mm.
for sure. So even within higher education, I was at one college and I was there for 4 years, and I decided to move to a different college, and I took a huge pay cut. And it was scary at that time as well. I thought about it, but I chose my career at that time, or the possibility of my career, the potential
Mm.
that I could have. And I thought that even though I took a step back, or what it felt like a step back, that I would eventually shoot forward. And it didn't happen that way. I left and I made less money when I left that job and I went back to the other college again. I was still making less money than I had originally made. And then again, when I left higher education a year and a half ago, I found a job about 4 months later, which that was a lot harder to find an actual job than
Mm.
I thought. When I left, I was like, oh, I'll find a job within a month or so. And it actually took me about 4 months to find a
Mm.
position. And even with my qualifications, I was so close to just taking anything, whether that was working at Target or working,
Right.
somewhere else just to get a paycheck. So it was a lot harder than I thought. When I did find a job, I took again another pay cut than what I was used to. So it was hard. It was hard navigating, obviously, the lifestyle and the paycheck that I was used to in my family.
Yeah.
Um, and taking less, so it was a struggle. I mean, I struggled for the last year or so because I just wasn't used to making the money that I was making again. And I had 3 kids and I was a single parent, and so it just, I mean, all that responsibility fell on me for sure. And I had to question a lot whether, and even within my career, and I think that helped a little bit of, do I make a decision because it's good for my career, or do I sacrifice, make a move for my career while sacrificing my family time, or the other way around? And so I was used to having to make that decision, whether I did decide to go for my career or not. Um, so I had a little practice in that. Not that I always made the right choice, of course. So when I did it in the last position that I had, when I was helping small business owners, although it was less money, I had help realizing the other benefits to the position as well. So it was more freedom. I was meeting a lot more people. It was more interactive. And so although I was again making less money, it was still very beneficial for me. And because of that position, I was able then to get this position, which pays me more. Um, and I don't know if I would have been ready for the position that I have now if I hadn't had that. And so
Oh,
really
yeah.
along the way, it's showing me that any position is beneficial. And like we said, it translates to your experiences. So when it comes to my personal life and my family, um, again, it's always though a battle. It's always like, I always feel like I'm sacrificing something.
Yeah.
Um, even when, volunteering, although now, and I think with my third baby, it's getting a lot easier to say no to
Mm.
things that affect my family life, because I do realize that they're little for so long. But it is still very, because you have that passion that you want to keep contributing to
Mm.
society and to your community, but then at the same time, I know that there are people that appreciate it, but then again, at the end of the day, if you feel, I think that if you don't do it, no one else will do it.
Mm.
And so something that I've started to think about is, I might be doing something and I might be saying yes to something and only giving them my 35%. And I'm taking the place of somebody that's ready to give 100%, just because I thought that nobody else would do it. And so by saying no, I'm actually giving someone else the opportunity to do that. So that makes me feel better
Yeah.
when I say no. But again, it's a lot of internal conflict for sure.
Well, and it is a balancing act. And I think that's
Mhm.
just living, right? Because we're
Right.
always making choices one way or another. But again, as a woman, especially a mother and a businesswoman, there's so much more when it comes to responsibility and love and passion, and it is a balance. And um, just personally, I try to when I'm making those, when I'm even thinking about it,
Mhm.
rather than talking about it from like a struggle or a battle perspective, though it can feel like that sometimes for sure. I really like to focus on, and it's balanced.
Mhm.
It's always, the scales are always going to be doing this, right? We're never
Mhm.
going to have them like this.
Right.
So it is some give and take
For
on one
sure.
or the other. So I think that what you described, going through those changes and saying you had to focus more on business or you focus more on family, I think that is just the balancing of the scales, and to be reminded that it doesn't make you a bad person to choose one or the other.
Mhm.
And you're right that if you make space because you've chosen one, somebody else is going to step in the other,
Mhm.
one way or another, right? I mean, I'm even thinking about from a family perspective, whether it's friends or parents or, a great babysitter, there's always somebody that's going to,
Yes,
that you can reach out to help with that balancing act that you do. So
for sure.
yeah, it's definitely a challenge to be a woman.
It is. Yes, that's a
Thank
great
goodness.
perspective, though, for
Yeah.
sure.
And thank goodness that I think women have a deep strength that we don't
Mhm.
always remember and don't always access.
Exactly.
So
Yes. You're right.
I think there's a lot there for us internally when we remember to do that. And it sounds like you've done a lot of reflecting through your years of being in the professional world, as well as, of course,
Mhm.
as being a family member, having kids, etc. Um, let's take it in a slightly different direction. Thinking about, especially since you do work with younger women as well as professional women,
Yeah.
what do you think the women of the world need to hear today about taking joyful risks?
I think the number one thing that they need to hear is that it will be okay. I think that a lot of us have learned to fear taking a risk, whether that's because we're told to be quiet and we're not supposed to be heard, especially within the Latino community. Women are not supposed to be loud. They're not supposed to take up space. They're not supposed to know more than their partners or their bosses or their fathers. And so I think that fear and that expectation has really stopped a lot of women from taking a risk. And that risk doesn't necessarily have to be bad. I think the word risk and conflict um, have negative connotations. And so when we think about that as a woman, we think, oh, we're doing something wrong, or, we have to, because I took a risk, I created conflict or I created uncertainty, or somebody is uneasy. And so
Mhm.
that's my fault and it's my responsibility to fix it. And so I think women need to be told that it's okay to take that risk. Somebody told me a long time ago, actually, it was a male coworker, and he said, women apply for a job or go for something when they feel 120% ready. And the percentages don't really matter, but what men apply or go for something when they feel 35% ready.
Mhm.
And so really that perspective, that's something that I've always kind of, I've reiterated several times to students and to young professionals, but also to myself. And that may or may not be true, obviously, for everybody, but I think just the fact that it's okay, and I think that we feel so much fear sometimes that we're not going to be enough, or we're not going to be seen enough, or we're not going to do a good enough job, when there are other individuals, whether they're male or not, that are going for that risk and they just take it day by day and their bare minimum is celebrated. Whereas sometimes women, at least I felt this way, I can be trying at my 120% and eventually that gets seen as expectation and not
Mhm.
celebrated as you're doing a fantastic job or you're over exceeding your expectations. Then it eventually becomes, oh, okay, you're doing great. And so when we do have those days where I can't give 120%, then I'm seen as lacking or it's seen as unacceptable. And so because we've had those experiences and other women have had those experiences, again, it prevents us from taking that risk. But it's okay. At the end of the day, it's
Mhm.
okay. We're going to be okay. And um, it's it's okay, I guess. Just
Yeah.
again, somebody to tell you it's going to be okay.
And that's, I so absolutely agree. And that's part of the reason I talk about it from a joyful risk perspective, because we often as women have been taught to be risk averse,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
because it's scary, and you're right,
Yeah.
that the percentages don't matter so much, but you're absolutely correct that there's been studies that the men go in 35% is their and think nothing of it, where
Right.
women to do try to over prepare or over
Mm-hmm.
not exert but over perform
Mm-hmm.
because we feel like we have to. And then actually that could be that it's just our capabilities too. We have that much more. But yeah, the joy, bringing the joy back into the risk of choice, right? That it's choosing
Okay.
to take the risks. So yeah, so glad that you brought that out. So just in where you are today,
Mm-hmm.
what vision is pulling you forward right now towards your next joyful risk?
My vision, definitely leading a life that I'm happy to live.
Mhm.
Um, right now, freedom is important to me, flexibility, having the opportunity to spend time with my kids. I definitely don't take that for granted. I grew up with a mom, I guess, in parents that had to work, the traditional factory job. So a lot of times they weren't able to attend um, school activities that were during the
Mhm.
day. Even, they got off at 5:15. So anything at 5:30, they were always running late. They didn't have time to go home and change. So then they just didn't go. This just the stress of that and the cycle of that of always feeling like you're on somebody else's time. Um, and a lot of people say, I have a friend that says, well, entrepreneurship is really the only true way that you can stop feeling that way, or, but again, I don't think that I'm at a place where I can be a full-time entrepreneur. So finding a career that is able to, in a position that is able to allow me to do that. Um, and again, right now, my vision is stability and happiness. And not necessarily happiness in the traditional form, right? But I think happiness from, again, feeling that freedom and feeling content.
Yeah. Well, and
Feeling
happiness is
that's
very personal, right? So
right.
what does it mean to you in this moment,
Exactly.
even? Because that
Mm-hmm.
can also shift. Yeah,
Right.
beautiful. I think that it's there. Part of the reason I do these interviews is because I feel like so many of these things are, in a sense, very common sense,
Mm-hmm.
but because we've been taught to think a certain way
Yes.
or view things in a certain way that we forget all that is available out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely love the perspective that you've brought today. Um, Talking about your passions, talking about the freedom that we, in a sense, create for ourselves by
Mm-hmm.
taking that risk, right? Because you could
Mm-hmm.
have been still back doing the higher education work and
Right.
not having the freedom to make the choices that you've made. So it's a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate the time. Is there anything more that you feel like women need to hear about you, what you're doing, um, your passion, your
Sure.
view about risk?
I guess just to end, I would say I think as women, or just as, we're social beings. And so we always think about our village or our tribe, and we always talk about that. And one of the risks that I had to take was leaving kind of the tribe that I thought that I had found, because I found that it wasn't as healthy as I had thought that it was. And so when I left, I was devastated. I thought those were my only friends. I thought that I would never have friends again. I thought that there was something wrong with me because I wasn't able to maintain those friends. And so what I found again is that you always find your tribe, your village, whatever you need, whatever your support system is supposed to look like. And that it's possible to find that in other women. That there are women that truly are just rooting for you. One of the quotes that I love is that collaboration happens at the top and competition happens at the bottom. And I really have found that that's true. People, I found over my couple of career changes, I guess 3 really, that there are individuals, but especially women, that are there to just help me with no really expectation of anything in return. And so that's where I've really tried to then move from a mentor to a sponsor, where I'm trying to make those connections and bring women, and especially young individuals, into spaces, instead of just showing them how I did it, and bringing that social capital, I guess, in a sense. And so again, it's been trial and error, but it is possible. And it's and if you don't find it, then you are still a very powerful person as a woman, that can take those risks. And thank you so much for having these conversations, because like you said, a lot of it does seem common sense, but I think it's because we're in it so much, and other women need to hear that, and we need to be reminded ourselves how far we've also come, and the risks that we've taken, and the joy, I guess, finding the joy in that. So thank you so much for what you do.
You're welcome. And it's with women such as yourself that it's made possible. Honestly, it's us. That's what I feel when you talked about tribe. That so spoke to me, because that is what that's kind of my mission, is like bringing women together to support women, because we have so much to offer if we can remember to take those joyful risks. So thank you very much. And I will look forward to sharing this information with others, and we'll be following up with you as we get the information out there. So awesome. Karina Pedroza, thank you so much for your time and words of wisdom that you've shared today.
Thank you so much, Teri.